The conflict in Yemen, especially the involvement of the Houthis and the ongoing military operations led by the U.S., has garnered increasing attention in recent years. As tensions escalate, the United States has ramped up its military operations, culminating in recent bombings of Yemen's Hodeidah Airport in response to the growing threat posed by the Houthi militia in the Red Sea region. These strikes come after former U.S. President Donald Trump's public call for annihilating Houthi aggression, sparking significant international concern. This article delves into the background of the conflict in Yemen, the role of the Houthis, and how the U.S. military, under the direction of both the Trump administration and current leadership, has responded to the situation. From the Red Sea's strategic importance to the impact of airstrikes and military deployments, this piece explores the complexities of the ongoing campaign against the Houthis. The Houthis, also known as Ansar Allah, are a Shiite rebel group based in northern Yemen. The group's origins trace back to the 1990s when they initially formed as a religious and cultural revivalist movement to preserve Zaidi Shia traditions. Over time, the movement became politically active and began to oppose the Yemeni government. This resistance was based on the perceived marginalization of their community, especially under the regime of President Ali Abdullah Saleh. In the early 2000s, the Houthis began taking up arms against the Yemeni government, citing grievances over political, economic, and religious discrimination. The group was named after their founder, Hussein Badreddin al-Houthi, who was killed by government forces in 2004. Despite his death, the movement continued to grow and take on a more militant stance. Over the years, the Houthis forged alliances with various factions in Yemen, including Saleh's forces, although this relationship became fractured in the years leading up to the ongoing civil war. By 2014, the Houthis had seized control of the Yemeni capital, Sana'a, and expanded their territory across much of northern Yemen. This marked the beginning of a broader conflict that would eventually draw in foreign powers, including Saudi Arabia, Iran, and the United States. The United States and Saudi Arabia view the Houthis as a major destabilizing force in the region, primarily because of their ties to Iran. The U.S., along with other Western powers, has voiced concerns over Iranian support for the Houthis, fearing the militia's actions could embolden Tehran's influence in the region. The U.S. response to Houthi aggression has varied over the years, with a focus on supporting Saudi Arabia and the UAE-led coalition in their efforts to defeat the Houthis. This coalition began a military campaign in Yemen in 2015, which included airstrikes, ground assaults, and naval blockades aimed at pushing the Houthis back and restoring the internationally recognized government of Abdir Abu Mansur Hadi. The U.S. military has also conducted a number of targeted strikes against Houthi leaders, missile sites, and drone production facilities, similar to recent operations mentioned in the news report. These efforts have been designed to disrupt the Houthis' ability to launch attacks on Saudi Arabia and other countries in the region. The U.S. strikes are part of a broader strategy to protect vital shipping routes in the Red Sea, particularly the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, a narrow waterway connecting the Red Sea to the Gulf of Aden. In March 2023, former President Donald Trump made waves by publicly declaring his intention to annihilate the Houthis. His statement, which came amidst rising concerns over Houthi threats to attack commercial shipping in the Red Sea, reflected a more aggressive stance towards the group. Trump's declaration of complete annihilation was a part of his broader America First foreign policy approach, which often involved confronting adversaries head-on without diplomatic compromises. The former president's words marked a shift in rhetoric from previous administrations, signaling a willingness to take more direct military action. Under Trump, the U.S. had already conducted numerous airstrikes in Yemen, primarily targeting Houthi missile storage facilities, drone production sites, and command centers. These operations, while strategically aimed at weakening the group's military capabilities, have also led to civilian casualties, including reports of women and children injured in airstrikes in residential areas. These casualties have led to criticisms of the U.S.'s role in the conflict, especially regarding the humanitarian impact of the campaign. The Red Sea holds significant strategic value for global trade and military operations. The Bab el-Mandeb Strait, which connects the Red Sea to the Gulf of Aden, is one of the most important maritime choke points in the world. Approximately 10% of global trade passes through this narrow waterway, making it a vital artery for shipping lanes. For this reason, the Houthis actions in the Red Sea have drawn international concern, particularly from the US and Saudi Arabia. The Houthis have made repeated threats to attack commercial shipping vessels in the region, potentially disrupting trade and destabilizing one of the world's busiest shipping routes. As a result, the U.S. has taken steps to increase its military presence in the region, including the deployment of additional aircraft carriers. The USS Harry Truman, a Nimitz-class aircraft carrier, was deployed to the Red Sea as part of a broader effort to monitor and deter Houthi attacks. The presence of these U.S. military assets has also served as a message to Iran, which is believed to support the Houthis through weapons shipments and military advice. The conflict in Yemen shows no signs of abating, with the Houthis continuing to launch attacks on Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and other targets in the region. The U.S., in coordination with its allies, has continued its military operations, including airstrikes and naval blockades aimed at restricting the movement of Houthi forces and denying them access to weapons supplies. In recent weeks, the U.S. military has targeted more than 30 Houthi locations, including missile storage depots, communication nodes, and weapons factories. These strikes are part of a concerted effort to degrade the Houthis' military capabilities and prevent them from further disrupting international shipping in the Red Sea. The Pentagon has stressed that the U.S.'s commitment to restoring freedom of navigation in the region remains unwavering. U.S. Central Command, which oversees military operations in the Middle East, has pledged to continue targeting Houthi military infrastructure and supporting Saudi and UAE efforts to combat the group. While the U.S. military's actions in Yemen are largely framed as necessary to protect global trade and regional stability, the humanitarian impact of these strikes cannot be ignored. According to reports from the Houthi-run Health Ministry, civilian casualties have been a regular consequence of U.S. airstrikes. In March 2023, airstrikes on the capital, Sana'a, injured 7 women and 2 children. The humanitarian situation in Yemen has been dire for years, with the UN calling it the worst humanitarian crisis in the world. Over 230,000 people have died as a result of the conflict, including both combatants and civilians. Millions of people have been displaced, and the country faces widespread famine and disease. Human rights organizations have repeatedly criticized both sides of the conflict for their actions, including the U.S. for its support of the Saudi-led coalition and the Houthis for their indiscriminate attacks on civilian targets. The question of whether military intervention by foreign powers in Yemen is exacerbating the humanitarian crisis remains a contentious issue in international forums. The conflict in Yemen is a complex and multifaceted struggle marked by shifting alliances, foreign interventions, and a humanitarian disaster that continues to unfold. The U.S.'s recent bombing campaign in Yemen, including airstrikes on Hodeidah Airport and other strategic targets, is just the latest chapter in a long-standing conflict. With the backing of former President Donald Trump's tough rhetoric and military strategy, the U.S. has taken a hardline stance against the Houthis. However, this approach raises difficult questions about the balance between military objectives and the humanitarian cost of such interventions. As the situation in Yemen continues to evolve, the international community will be watching closely. The ongoing conflict in the Red Sea, the fate of commercial shipping, and the broader geopolitical dynamics of the Middle East all depend on how this complex conflict plays out in the coming months and years.